Hello and welcome. Today we are focusing on a single story and why it matters. We are looking at what is happening to the prison camps holding Islamic State suspects and their families following a series of high-profile escapes. These camps are located in Syria at a time when the Syrian government has reached a ceasefire agreement that will allow Kurdish forces to gradually integrate into the Syrian army. The hope is that this deal will bring an end to weeks of fighting in the northeast of the country. Stability in this region is important not just for Syria but for many countries around the world because this is where the camps are located and where they have been guarded by Kurdish forces. To understand what is happening on the ground, we are joined by a Middle East correspondent who has recently returned from Syria. Thank you for joining us. Let us begin by talking about these camps that hold Islamic State fighters. How large are they and who is being held inside them? There are several different locations and several prisons, if we can call them that. The largest one is the Al-Hol camp in northeast Syria. Thousands of Islamic State fighters are being held there along with their families. You see many women wearing full veils and many children as well. The situation is deeply tragic. It has become a breeding ground for radicalization under extremely harsh conditions. Children who see a woman without a head covering may shout at her and accuse her of being an unbeliever. Some even repeat violent slogans they have learned. It is a closed environment where extremist ideas continue to circulate and grow. Until recently, the responsibility for guarding and managing these camps and prisons fell entirely on the Syrian Democratic Forces, which are Kurdish-led forces. However, during negotiations with the Syrian government, an agreement was reached that control and monitoring of the camps would eventually be handed over to the central government. Unfortunately, during this transition, there were cases where Kurdish forces abandoned some of the prisons. In one particular case, the doors were reportedly left open. We have confirmed reports that dozens and possibly more Islamic State fighters escaped and attempted to flee toward Iraq. The Syrian government has said that most of them were later captured, but the exact numbers remain unclear. These camps also hold foreign fighters and people from other countries who traveled to Syria. Can you tell us more about that? Yes, there are thousands of foreign nationals. During the height of Islamic State recruitment, people arrived from the United States, the United Kingdom, France, and many other countries around the world. Syria became a hub for radicalization, and many of these individuals joined Islamic State forces. Today, their home countries are still debating what to do with them. This is where the role of the Syrian government becomes critical. Over the past week, officials have spoken about the future of these detainees. The United States has said it has already begun moving 7,000 fighters from northeast Syria into Iraq. As for the remaining detainees, the Syrian government says they will go through a legal process. Those found guilty will face prosecution. Those who are not convicted will be sent to rehabilitation centers. After years inside these camps, many detainees have been exposed to extremist ideology, and without rehabilitation they could pose a danger to their communities and beyond. To understand the bigger picture, we need to step back and look at how we arrived at this point. Kurdish forces were guarding Islamic State suspects while also clashing with the Syrian army, and now a ceasefire has been announced. This follows a moment of optimism last year when a new government took power after the fall of the previous regime. In March 2025, Kurdish forces led by their commander traveled to Damascus and met with the new Syrian president. They signed an agreement aimed at unifying the country and merging Kurdish forces into the Syrian army and public institutions. The government set the end of 2025 as a deadline for implementation. Throughout the year, officials said meetings and negotiations continued, but Kurdish leadership repeatedly resisted putting the agreement into practice. So although the deal was signed, it was never fully carried out. That is correct. The agreement was supported by the United States, which had long been the main ally of Kurdish forces. However, Kurdish leadership continued to push for autonomous rule in northeast Syria. It is important to note that they control not only Kurdish-majority areas but also Arab regions such as Deir-ez-Zor and Raqqa, which are rich in oil and represent major sources of national income. Kurdish forces controlled oil revenues, border crossings, and even airports. This was unacceptable to the new Syrian government. The president issued a decree granting Kurds full citizenship rights, including recognition of their language and equal legal status. These rights had been denied for decades under the previous regime. Many Kurds had been classified as unregistered and deprived of basic rights. The new government made clear that this approach would not continue. Despite these steps, Kurdish leadership refused to give up control over oil resources and autonomous governance. However, pressure and mediation, mainly from the United States and other international partners, eventually led to the agreement now being implemented. Kurdish forces have agreed to merge into the Syrian army while maintaining specific brigades within Kurdish areas. The United States had supported Kurdish forces for years. Some argue that it has now abandoned them by backing the new Syrian government. How do you see it? It depends on perspective. The United States supported the Syrian Democratic Forces during the fight against Islamic State when there was no central government it could work with. Now there is a new government in Damascus that has opened relations with the international community, including the United States. Sanctions have been lifted and the current president has been removed from terrorism lists. Washington has sent a clear message that the fight against Islamic State should now be led by the Syrian state. The United States has not abandoned the Kurds but has told them their future lies within a united Syria. Their role now is to be part of the national framework rather than operating independently. The most important challenge ahead is whether the Syrian government can truly represent a multi-ethnic and multi-religious society. Protecting minority rights, including those of the Kurds, will be essential. Whether Syria can achieve stability and unity while preventing the resurgence of extremism remains an open question and one that will have consequences far beyond its borders.